She has always been there.
The diversity is just mind-boggling. So I'm going to kind of wait for everybody to settle down, because we are going to really try to remember Ed at the very beginning. We could take 2 or 3 days to do this, and I think Ed would go for that, but we really don't have all that much time. On behalf of the Ward family, welcome to the celebration of the life of Edwin Forrest Ward. As from time immemorial, in Celtic tradition, the tolling of a bell, 3 tolls, 3 times, signifies the death of a man in the community. During this time, I would suggest that we focus on the reasons we have gathered: to remember, to grieve, to comfort, to dignify, and to celebrate this life. Keep in mind, we are here to liberate the spirit of Ed from the earthly clothing he wore since birth, so that he may be born again into the unfettered realm of the spirit from whence he came. So, for everyone here, your thoughts, accompanied by the symbolic tolling of the bell, will facilitate Ed's trip. Jaxon? Jaxon, thank you. On behalf of all of us here, as we kind of step into this profound moment, is, if you'll allow me, to read a prayer kind of from all of us. And if you think about it, you might even know who it's from. In the spirit of humility, we give thanks for all that is. We are grateful for all who have shared their wisdoms. We acknowledge our ancestors who brought us here. We are thankful for the opportunity to walk this world and to share this blessing that is life, and to experience the interconnectedness through the rituals of our lives, as with this memorial today for Edwin Forrest Ward. We are ever appreciative for the love of family, the practice of generosity, and the honor of our creative spirit, a spirit which Ed helped us to nourish. Well, I guess in a certain way, if we just take a moment to reflect on this, we will have actually done an Edwin Forrest Ward service. So, we'll just take 2 minutes here to really let that soak in. Ed was a force, a smart-ass, streetwise kid from Philly, a gentle, seductive poet, a crusader for justice, peace, and voice, an engaging storyteller, a bold and beautiful man, sensitive and kind, and stubborn to a fault. Husband, father, grandfather, celebrant, artist, actor, playwright, filmmaker, business manager, teacher, master of ceremonies, publisher, coach, a Denver cultural legend, and friend. Edwin Forrest was born in Philadelphia on January 13, 1948. He was raised by his mother, Betty, and three older sisters, Connie, Carol, and Virginia. With Ed's father, John, they lived in a rough and tumble neighborhood on the northeast side. Ed, of course, has written stories about the hood. He learned early to stand up for himself. You have to be knocked down a few times to learn that lesson. He's light on his feet, a good athlete, smart kid, and all that. Ed attended Catholic schools in Philadelphia. It was at St. Joseph's Prep, under the tutelage of the Jesuits, that he honed his skills in writing and critical thinking. In a biographical essay, Ed writes, "When I was a child attending St. Bernard's Catholic Elementary School, I was teacher's pet for 8 years in a row. I'm sure it had something to do with my desire to please my mother, and therefore every woman with whom I came in contact, like my nuns, female lay teachers, as well as, let's not forget, my intellect, politeness, curly hair, bright blue-green eyes." I could resist. Every nun would tell me at some point in the year I ought to become a priest. Similarly, when I went to St. Joseph's Preparatory High School, a Jesuit school, my Latin teacher said the same thing. Well, as much as I would have liked to please my devout Catholic mother, who would have loved having a priest as a son, I told all those with those priestly designs on me, on my future, hell no! I'm going to marry and have kids. Although, I must admit, I always did like ritual, both secular and religious. So it's kind of funny how things turned out. Ed attended Drexel University in Philadelphia. He pursued a dual major in physics and education. During his college years, he was reacquainted with his childhood sweetheart, Carol Marie Rossi. When they were both 20, they married. After graduation from Drexel, he taught high school English in Woodbury, New Jersey. Ed was well liked by both students and faculty. He pioneered many courses on Bob Dylan and rock lyrics. When Facebook rolled out, some of his former students became online friends and often recounted the impact as a teacher he had on their lives. Both teaching and marriage ended in 1974. Ed made his way to Denver. He was on a journey of reinventing himself, and it was in Denver he focused on his creative side, his love of language, storytelling, and painting. Ed had always been creative, creating posters and promotional materials for his school, clubs, writing stories to tell at friends' gatherings. He was inspired both by Albert Einstein and Bob Dylan. After settling on Pearl Street in Washington Park through Denver University, Ed began teaching a class on Bob Dylan, the music, lyrics, and influential cultural changes that swirled around him. The class may also have been code for meeting young women who may have shared his interest in Dylan. And there were plenty. He was in full bachelor mode. Then, in September of 1977, his world changed. Barbara, the hostess at the Boston Half Shell, where Ed was head waiter, invited him to her upcoming wedding and said she knew he was an artist and asked if he would both attend and paint a Just Married sign for their car. He said he would love to do that, but he would need a ride to the wedding in Genesee Park as his Dodge van was in the shop. Barbara told him, "I'll fix you up." On the appointed Sunday morning, his doorbell rang. He had overslept, and his blind date was greeted by two large and unruly dogs and a very sleepy Ed. Marcia and Ed spent the day together, getting to know each other. It was a day full of flirtation and fun. However, once the festivities concluded, Ed had to go to work, and Marcia had classes to return to in Laramie. They parted with a kiss. The next day, Ed arranged for a friend to cover his shifts, and he hitchhiked 155 miles to Laramie to see Marcia. I'm sure she was a bit shocked. Thus began their 45 years together as soulmates and partners who were rarely apart. They married on July 8th, 1979. Their first year as a married couple found Ed delving into poetry and the literary underground that was thriving in Denver. Poetry readings at bars, bookstores, and coffee houses. Ed was an absolute regular at Cafe Nepenthes. Ed established himself as a poet to be reckoned with. The anti-establishment of the Beat Generation writers of the day, Larry Lake, James Ryan Morris, Tony Sabella, Alfred Clayhauer, and visual artist Steve Wilson, put Ed's bona fides as a poet to the test. Michael Clark writes about this, and you may read it in his mailing. Ed was, though, up to the challenge, and ultimately he was accepted and eventually embraced by the established anti-establishment. He was part of their readings, gatherings, and art exhibitions. The Beats were also publishing small books and magazines. Ed was watching and participating, and yes, learning. Ed soon started his own poetry readings. He not only gave himself a stage, but also his contemporaries. He founded Passion Press. He published poetry, stories, art, photography, and books, his own and others. He handmade books, binding them with an antiquated handmade wooden press and bookbinding glue. Well, Ed's networking, as we can see here, was a vital cog in the local contemporary art scene. He focused on the spoken word. His contribution to the Denver art scene was transformative. Ed was neither a beatnik, nor a peacenik, nor a hippie. He was all three. A couple of years after their marriage, two important events happened in Ed's life. First, Ed received his ordination papers from the Temple of Man, which licensed him to perform weddings, funerals, christenings, and provide spiritual counsel. Ed said the ordination paper was the second most cherished document in his life. And he was telling this to Marcia, so therefore his first is the certificate of marriage to Marcia. The Temple of Man was an important institution for Ed. To be ordained in the Temple of Man, one must be nominated by someone already in the organization. And Ed was. The Temple of Man the credo of the Temple of Man is formed in the dedication to the sentient individual for the preservation of creative works, to help broaden perception and increase understanding between all men and women everywhere, who, being unified by the supreme force of life, are working toward a higher social and spiritual evolution. It is not a worship so much as a quest. It is a way of becoming, of liberation. One of the established tenets of the temple is art is God, is love. Ed went on to officiate hundreds of wedding ceremonies over 5 decades And beginning in 2021, he served as a celebrant for dozens of funerals through Olinger's mortuary. He was acknowledged by his wedding clients and families of the deceased with heaps of praise and in hopes of keeping in touch with him so that they might learn more of this man who had a unique and charming delivery and a great way with words. The second important challenge happened in 1981. Ed became a father. Passion was born. Ed envisioned himself as a father from an early age. His own father, John, more present during the childhood years of his three older sisters, was mostly absent during his upbringing. Ed was committed to be a totally involved parent and on equal footing with Marcia. This would be their strength in raising their two sons. Following Passion's entrance into the world, Ed and Marcia decided they would sell their home on Pearl Street and take to the road for adventure and to provide Ed with an equal part in parenting that he yearned for. They traveled for a year with short stays in Northern California, Los Angeles, Bisbee, and Austin before returning to Denver. Soon after their return, Zenith arrived. As parents with two rambunctious boys, they hiked, camped, houseboated, and hot springed in the Colorado mountains as much as possible. Ed and Marcia were both involved in the boys' schooling and sports. For 8 years, beginning in the early 90s, Ed became the director of the Catholic Youth Recreation Association, again his Jesuit training. He would run summer baseball programs for over 3,000 girls and boys in Denver. He also coached Zenith's team, where in their last game, they won the city championship. Marcia recalls that these were some of the best days of their lives as parents. Summer evenings in the parks with parents of players provided a warm and bonding experience. The boys learned to tolerate their father's gift for gab, as often spring nights were consumed with phone calls from parents signing up their kids for a team. The boys might be awaiting phone calls from their friends, but once Ed got a call, they would both proclaim in exasperation, he's going to tell them the whole damn story of the CYRA. It kind of became a family joke. The kids tolerated it. Ed, this is one of his favorite stories. He especially loved telling the parents how he uncovered the underhanded dealings of the Police Athletic League with Denver Public Schools. He discovered that Denver Public Schools and the Police Athletic League had conspired for years to pre-permit all of the baseball fields in Denver Public Schools before the permitting process had officially opened. He actually discovered this by staying in that building the night before so that he would be first in line. And when he got to the door, they said all the fields are taken. So Ed took him to task, single-handedly, and against a cadre of legal experts, if you can imagine those two organizations. Ed, being in the right, eventually won. He forced the Police Athletic League to capitulate and allow the Catholic Youth Recreation Association equal access to those grandfathered fields. Yes. All right, Ed. Ed was also a visual artist. Some of his works are on display here. As an artist, Ed reveals his sense of the particular as it relates to larger themes. I read here Ed's comments on art. I am an artist, self-taught. My watercolor ink on arche papier are created with what Navajo rug weavers call eye dazzlers in mind. Meaning, my imagery is meant to work first and foremost on a visual level. I like to think my imagery at least squiggles, if not dazzles. In fact, some artist friends have characterized my work as squiggle-ism, a most modern, distant cousin of pointillism. I'd agree. Because I believe the experience of art should be gratifying and burdenless, as opposed to didactic or challenging or inflammatory, I attach no hidden intellectual, moral, or political agenda to my imagery. Bob Dylan once said, "It is for myself and my friends my stories are sung." Ditto for my watercolors. As I said earlier, Ed was from Northeast Philadelphia and attended Catholic schools. However, on the way to St. Bernard's Elementary School, he passed Edwin Forrest Elementary School every day. Was Edwin Forrest his namesake? Was he a descendant? Edwin Forrest was a renowned Civil War Shakespearean American actor who was also from Philadelphia. Edwin Forrest Ward had a lifelong fascination with Edwin Forrest. Looking at photographs of Edwin Forrest by the Civil War photographer Matthew Brady, one can see an uncanny resemblance to our Ed. The hairline, the profile, deep-set eyes, intensity of being. Well, whatever the nature of this relationship was, Edwin Forrest Ward was cosmically connected to and inspired by Mr. Forrest. Edward Forrest Ward was also fascinated and mesmerized by theater, especially his own creations. He wrote, directed, produced, and starred in a recreation of Denver Poets' Day, 1979, a mano-a-mano reading between Larry Lake and James Ryan Morris. The play was captivating and revealing, with Ed as the stern and intimidating Morris. The performance encouraged and included audience participation. Poets, writers, artists, beatniks, and hippies all contributed to the scene at Denver Civic Center Park. It was a true happening, one of the early ones in Denver. For 10 years, starting in 2010, Ed performed his one-man play, Testosterone Monologues, numerous times, a retelling of his Philadelphia and young bachelor time in Denver. He played Hogan in Muddy Slightly Off-Center production of Eugene O'Neill's A Moon for the Misbegotten, and numerous productions at the Mercury Cafe. Ed was at his zenith when on stage. Ed's final foray into his storied public life was his monthly Mercury Cafe event. Stories, stories, bring your stories. Always a little ahead of the curve, Ed's event was on the cusp of the resurgence and interest in live storytelling events. He often wrote a new story for each month. The evenings here were a culmination of everything that was important to him. Great stories, socializing with lovers of language, wonderful food and drink, and a perfect date night with Marcia. In 2008, Ed and Marcia became grandparents, another pivotal shift in their lifestyle. The joy of grandparenting was as overpowering and as magical as parenting. When Dannica was born to Passion and Jaimee, she became Ed's pride and joy. With robust enthusiasm, Ed again experienced the joy he felt as a father. He loved spending time with her at playgrounds, the libraries, and reading books. They formed a special bond. Jaxon was born in 2012. Jaxon reminded Ed of his sons, a combination of both Zenith and Passion. Zenith would add 4 beautiful children to the family with his marriage to Lisa. Felicia, Elijah, Olivia, and Victoria. And Zenith and Lisa would add 2 more with the birth of their twins, Noah and Jonah, in 2015. Ed was blessed with a beautiful blended family of remarkable grandchildren. He loved and cherished his grandchildren, and he was extremely proud of the fathers his sons had become. Ed's a journey to the finish line. Many people circled around him to remind him of what a wonderful life he had led. And this is that circle. Many of you called, visited, emailed, Facebook with him. Jaxon this year played summer baseball, and Ed was able to attend his games. He was delighted to know that Jaxon hit a home run in the championship game. Ed was able to see Bob Dylan at the Betcher Center. He visited with his sons, his daughters-in-law, and his grandchildren in the final days. And he was able to wish his father-in-law, a happy 97th birthday. In the last year of his life, he compiled, shepherded, edited, and brought to publication the writings of Alfred Playhauer. It's truly a masterwork. And he's given us a final gift, On the Way to Sleeping Giant, a collection of his short stories, written, in my opinion, in the freshest first-person prose I have read. On the morning of his passing, he received his copy from the publisher. That is full circle. He passed at home in the arms of his beloved Marcia. Now, as a point of personal privilege, I am of the age and generation of Ed. We have shared paths, crossed paths over the past 50 years. I have always marveled at Ed's commitment to enlightenment, truth, purpose, dignity, and kindness. At the end of his traveling days, I asked him to conduct a celebration of life service for a mutual friend celebrated in this very room. Ed said to me, "Joe, I can't travel anymore." This was followed, of course, by a flurry of email scripts, tips, and approaches on conducting the ceremony. I thanked him, and I thank him now. Ed, I miss you. Now Jason and Marty. You guys would come up. Jason Eklund and Marty Humphries. Thank you.
I'll just start by borrowing somebody else's funeral joke from years back for another musician. Came up to play a song for him and he said, "I booked this gig 30 years ago." And that would be about right, because I met Ed and lots of you here back in '92 downstairs. So the continued full circle of things. I asked my friend Marty to play along with me because in the last dozen or so years he's played some of my Mercury gigs, and we had gone over to visit Ed at the house and played some music for him over there as well. But the first song I'm going to do was a favorite of Ed's. I wrote this in 2005 about the story that came out of the ivory-billed woodpecker coming back from the dead. And it's got the kind of native spiritualism aspect to it. The great ether, and he had mentioned it in his new book too, so I was like, okay, he wants me to play this one. If this story ain't true, Lord, it should be. Once again, in knocking on the old dead trees goes the bird. Here you fly again. You were thought to never be back no more. You were last seen in 1944, ghost bird. Here you fly again. In the woods of North Louisiana, and after Bill was rumored, once again showed ghost bird. Here you fly again. Found in swamp in Arkansas. Seems like you've been hiding from the law. Ghost bird, here you fly again. Fly again. Fly again. Spirits come back from the dead. I'm gonna sing a song so the word is spread. Ghost bird, here you fly again. Did you come back and show us where to go? Blackbird, a white buffalo, ghost bird, here you fly again. Of 2005, that of the blue air flying, and still alive, ghost bird, here you fly again. So if this story ain't true, Lord, it should be. So once again here knocking on the old dead tree, ghost bird, here you fly again. One more song. Wrote this not too long ago, 6-7 years ago. Sort of intended to be a secular gospel. There's no specific denomination involved, but just the universality of the light is enough. And Ed used this song a few times at some of his funeral services. I had a recording of it, and he played this accompanying a slideshow or something. So I want to do this in that sense of things. Embrace the light. It has always been there, but you need to find it. Then you'll find it'll always find you. Embrace the light. Let love find you. And embrace the light. Don't be afraid of inspiration when it calls you. If the muse calls you, embrace and don't fight. Let love find you and embrace the light. Every day you live, you have to get up and give it your best try. With everyone you meet, try to open your heart. Don't ask yourself why. Embrace the light. Let love find you. Embrace the light. Sunrise, sunshine, sunset. Life can have regret, yet the magic of love and the blessings of life will you find you to embrace the light. Embrace the light. Let love find you. Embrace the light. Embrace the light. Let love find you. Embrace the light. Let love find you and embrace the light.
And now, Paul Kirschling is going to read a couple of poems.
S.A, are you in the crowd here? Okay, I need you to come up too. Hello, everybody. I'm going to read a poem by James Ryan Morris, one of Ed's favorites. I'm sure that so many of you have, when you were with Ed in his James Ryan Morris, it's not really a phase, he did it his whole life. But he also became an expert on him and did lectures and presentations and all kinds of things on him. And very, very important poet in his life. And then S.A. Griffin is going to follow up with another poem by Stuart Perkoff. This one is called The Stag. It's from his book, Diana's Smile, published by his own Croupier Press, 1969. The Stag. He moves through the park with caution at his side. The myth is known too well, and there is fear of being struck down like a stag. Yet he considers the wound and knows that possibly it will be tended by hands of concern. And so he moves under the moon's shaft-like light to take his chance, as all must.
Poem by who's live happening or is it memorized? The other one. Yes. No, I don't want to use the mic. This is a poem by Stuart Z. Perkoff. Peace, peace. We too shall rest, and in the air no breath, and in the eye no birds, and in the black no needs. Then, when we are nothing and one, and our flesh is eaten by trees that thrust to the sun, and our blood is drunk by lizards with flickering tongues, and all that we are is nothing and all, and being born. Then over the fields of quiet wheat, the wind will caress, and there will be peace, and we too shall rest. Burning of the poem, as Frankie Rios said, the lady is the process, the poem, she is everything, she's the blank page. And last night at Ted Bacchus, I saw a photo of Ed burning the poem. This is for Ed Ward. This is for Ed Ward. As the burning of the poem sanctifies everything. I'll get it, don't worry about it. Thanks all, thanks holy, disciple of life.
Stuart C. Perkoff, James Ryan Morris probably would not have known these guys or heard their voices if I had not run into Ed, and these are two of the greatest poets of the 20th century. The next poem I'm going to read is a poem written by John Mocker. He couldn't make it today, he's in New Mexico. And he wrote this for Ed, and the title of the poem is taken from a line of Ed's. And the title is called A Bouquet of Earthly Locations, for Edwin Forrest Ward. A snow squall passes through. Each tree branch scours the wind, hounded gray, and returns empty. My friend passed away. His last whispers on the phone today, as delicate as the ash tattoos on our foreheads, first day of Lent. We were altar boys, not at the same time and place, but passion and ritual familiarized themselves with us early on, weren't asphyxiating presences, but guided our hearts and minds when we discovered the rebellious sanctity of words. The cold returns with a spaghetti western's vengeance. The wind plants one last winter behind all our eyes. Bare trees on the street where you lived return from the sky with no ersatz promises, their rituals already in place. When I listened to your voice, the assemblage that was our lives passed through the window, full-spirited, a bouquet of earthly locations. We opened the same doors of perception, read our poems before the same crowded house of night, the same claustrophobic jazz bars with their altars of soul. We tried not to be our own erasures. We tried to coax desolate angels of inspiration into notebooks wired to our hearts after dark. Dawn bed of flowers, hear the deep sigh of earth. Gracias, Ed. Peace.
So in 1988, back when I used to work all the time, back when I had darker hair and I was about 20, 30 pounds lighter, I came to Denver for the first time to work on a Perry Mason movie of the week. I was the guest star of Bad Guy, and I was in town for about 4 weeks. And whenever I go on location, I don't hang out with the crew or the actors. I go to try to find where the poets are. I don't know how I found it. I think it might have been Westward or something like that, but I found out that there was an open reading at Muddy's. This was like, yeah, go ahead, give it up for Muddy's.
Which one?
The good one. I was in the basement. It was 14th and Arapahoe, I think. Is that where it was? It was, I think, February. There was snow on the ground, and that was the moment that changed my life. I showed up to the reading. I was the asshole from California, and that's kind of some of the rumblings. Oh yeah, asshole from California. And then at the end of my asshole reading, Ed came up immediately and introduced himself to me, and we became immediately bonded. I wouldn't be here without Ed. I mean, I'm here for Ed. I'm here because of Ed. Ed took me under his wing. He showed me Denver. He introduced me to the poets here. Smoked me out, of course. Copiously. And so upon one of those occasions, we were going to a book fair at a junior college somewhere here in Denver. And as we wound down the path, it was wide enough for maybe one person at a time, and we came into an opening, and there was this grassy knoll. And I think what happened was the poets were kicked out of the building. They weren't allowed to read in the building. So they were reading on this grassy knoll. And I was blown away because it looked like, to me, like this amazing reading. People were listening to each other. I mean, really listening to each other. Taking turns. Nobody was announcing names. It was like unbelievable. So I crawled over to the reading and started taking it in. And then I kind of checked it out to see who I thought might have been the person, like a sign-up list. And so I really quietly crawled across the grass to this guy, and I said, "Hey man, where do I sign up?" And he goes, "You already have." And that was, hell, the king of mushrooms now. Our good times. I'm getting older. With a Cheshire smile on his face. But that moment was an epiphany for me, because I went back to LA and I founded a group called the Karma Bar. I had a 59 Cadillac that I just bought. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, just with a 59 Cadillac. And I loaded up with my friends, and we laid down the rules with each other, and we hit the road, and we came back to Denver. That was our first stop. But anyway, Ed introduced me to Larry Lake that day, and a number of other people. People that are here tonight were at Muddy's that night. You know, I've been back and forth to Denver many, many times. Ed brought me into the Temple of Man, basically, you know, introduced me to the Venice West. It's ironic that I had to come to Denver to find out what was happening in Los Angeles by Ed. But that's exactly what happened. So I got basically brought into the Venice West scene, and again, I just can't tell you how much Ed changed my life. He put me on the path, and over the years, you know, learned so much from Ed. Seeing his kids grow up, Zenith and Passion, they were like, Jesus, I mean, they were like, what, 3 and 5 years old or something when I met them? And so it was unbelievable. But, you know, and I met John Macker. The first reading I ever did here in Denver was at Passion Place with John Macker. So anyhow, that's pretty much, I don't want to take up too much time, but just trying to lay my little thing down, which I'm sure a lot of people have the same similar story about how Ed really changed their lives. And it's just wonderful to see everyone here today. I expected a big crowd. I mean, I expected like standing room only. I mean, Ed deserves only the best. His passion for people, his passion for the world, his passion for the craft, it is transformative. And you know, I saw a movie recently called 32 Sounds. And the beginning of the movie started out with a little thing about a man named Babbage who was credited with creating the world's first computer. However, he dedicated his life to trying to understand where sound went. And with that being said, we can never unknow Ed. We can never unfeel Ed. We can never unlove Ed. Ed will be with us always. He will walk with us. He will talk with us. He will be here always. And I just want to say how much I really love Ed and Marcia and Zenith and Passion, your families. My love to all of you. My love to all of you.
Okay, I'm going to read one more poem. This one's by Ed. And this one's called Even the Most Kindred Spirits Have Separate Bodies. Love is couscous cake with lemon curd, the affection of an afternoon's kiss, giving up lust for Lent. Love bends an ear to hear, a fantasy to sharpen its delights against, and asks questions of fidelity and the trust of just one name between us. Ah, drive time with my Valentine. In the backseat, the kids asleep. It a picnic keeps, as mountain towns, a century, golden old ghost goodbye. The curves along the creek host an infinity of light, sliced by jagged peaks as we fly in the face of a suitcase of facts against us. We, legatees of outlaw mountain lore, recognize we do the effect the music has on us as the road follows water through the canyon, while centrifugation creates our lean of bodies round sticks at 55 and switchbacks at 20. We babble our way onto the next ascent and reminisce. Taste the sweet sweat of a hot springs rendezvous. With you, your pinto winding west across a valley so high, 'twas lit by stars that moonless night. One hand upon the wheel, I keep the other on your thigh. Even the most kindred souls have separate bodies. Even the most kindred souls have separate bodies.
And now, Passion Ward.
Dad, you gave me the coolest name in Denver, Colorado. Passion Day Boy. Most of the ladies out there have heard of me, but I don't know anything about them. Yes, you can check my ID for proof. Growing up, my family lived in some of the coolest places in Denver because of my dad. A loft downtown, a Cherry Creek bungalow, and in the East High School District. Dad, you were always there to support me and what I was doing. Bringing me home my first alto saxophone kicked off many adventures. Going to DSA was a great time in my life, and you were there for all of it. Attending the concerts, driving me to private lessons, and taking me to get my saxophone tuned up. Even more important, when I hosted the jazz jam here at the Mercury Cafe, you were always the one to throw the biggest tip in the tip jar. Dad, thanks for always showing up for whatever I participated in. At baseball games, you could always hear my dad cheering the loudest when I was pitching. Rockin' fire, Pash. Some of my childhood friends still have that phrase tattooed in their brain and bring it up in casual conversations. Almost everyone asks me this question when I tell them my name. Were your parents hippies? I tell them, no, my parents are beatnik artists. I will always know my dad to be the poet and the wordsmith. Most of you have been here at the Mercury Cafe for an open poetry night that he hosted, Stories, Stories, Bring Your Stories, or just hanging out to be around my dad and his friends. I know everyone in the audience was touched by my dad's words, laughed at his stories, or talked about how awesome it was when he got off stage. One of the coolest things was a beatnik party upstairs for Neil Cassidy's birthday, and my dad got to perform for Jello Biafra, the old lead singer of the famous punk band, the Dead Kennedys. I get to tell all my punk friends, yeah, my dad opened up for Jello Biafra. Dad, you will be missed, and it's hard without you and not talked to. And thanks for all the life lessons, the support growing up and as an adult, and for the unconditional love. So now I'm going to play a couple songs in honor of my dad, nostalgia in Times Square for our trip to New York when we went to jazz clubs, and I'll follow that up with Song for My Father, and There's No Explanation Needed, and S.A. I really like Where Does the Sound Go? This is Nostalgia in Times Square, written by Charles Mingus. Yeah, Tom, you can come up.
Horace Silver, right?
It is a Horace Silver
Yeah,
song.
Horace Silver. I'll be back here, man. You started.
So this is a song wrote by my father, Horace Silver. It's a little Latin groove.
What key?
It would be an F.
G, D, E, F.
Now we're going to have Marilyn Megenity, which the Mercury Cafe wouldn't be in existence without. Come up.
This is wonderful. The Mercury Cafe's first poetry reading was at 13th and Pearl in 1978. Later, after the landlord kicked us out, we moved to a dumpy little spot at 14th and Champa. One of the best things about that little Mercury Cafe was that down the street at 14th and Market, Michael Clark had his wonderful Cafe Nepenthes. And over the river and at the top of the hill, Cat and Joe DeRose had the iconic Muddy Waters of the Platte coffee house. We all ran up and down the hill and across the railroad tracks and patronized each other's businesses. We shared workers, customers, artists, and bohemia. That's when I first became aware of Edwin Forrest Ward. I think he was doing a regular poetry thing at Nepenthes. He may also have read at the Little Mercury. He and Marcia were making movios. Video filmmakers they were. When the Mercury resurfaced at 13th and Pearl with a new landlord, I think Marcia and Ed were pretty busy with 2 baby boys. When we got kicked out again, it took a little while, but we ended up here on California Street. Muddy's had also been kicked out of their space and ended up down the block. They held the first annual poetry rodeo, and that made me remember that we needed a regular reading here. My first thought for a host was Ed. I knew he could not only handle it, but he was connected to a lot of writers and that he himself was a great poet. We started out in the dining room downstairs in the corner by the piano. Ed's skills as a host and a writer soon expanded the event into the Jungle Room, where poets read to a packed house every Friday night. Ed mentored writers. Many of those became mentors of writers as teachers in the public schools and universities. Ed was so proud of his friends and his fellow artists. I love that. The Friday night readings are still packed, and over the last couple of months, the hosts have been reading Ed's poems. Ed was up for anything artistic. His Passion Press published many of our community's books. He and Marcia were in a scene in our annual Valentine's Follies. That was Ed's name for the show. Their scene was a married couple in the bedroom having an argument about who's the boss. Ed was always a featured poet at our annual Neil Cassidy birthday bash as an authentic beat. In the early 90s, he came up to me, all excited, eyes sparkling, bubbling over with, "I have an idea." He probably said, "I got an idea. Let's do a New Year's Eve erotic poetry festival upstairs." The Mercury's done that festival to warm up the start of every New Year's Eve to a packed house ever since. Ed created another jewel for the Mercury. Stories, stories, bring your stories. And he created it, promoted it, and hosted it for 10 years, bringing together storytellers, yarn spinners, and raconteurs to a full house of avid listeners. Ed's devotion to words, the arts, bohemia, and artists was only surpassed by his love and devotion for Marcia and passion and Zenith. He was so proud of Marcia. He was so proud of passion. He was so proud of Zenith. I love that. I was lucky enough to experience his skill as a wedding officiant and a memorial officiant. Of course, he was really good at both. Thinking about him this last month, I've realized that maybe the greatest gift that he gave to all of us was that he personified the secret of a good life. Enthusiasm, commitment, and passion. Ed, buddy, thank you.
In all this emotion, we have lost the order of speakers. So, that's why I'm back up. Zena, if you would please come up.
This celebration has just been so wonderful and something that I think would have made my dad so happy and so proud, and I'm loving sitting here listening and hearing all this stuff and even, you know, learning some new things, you know, like that Artful Good Times was the king of mushrooms, you know. Who would have thought? In the 80s, we lived in this great loft in Lodo, and I feel like my parents were always, you know, ahead of the curve or a little ahead of their time. You know, we lived in Lodo when it was, you know, still pretty much a shithole, but this loft we lived in was so cool. It had an elevator that, you know, opened up into the place, and, you know, the ceilings were high enough that we had a rope swing, you know, in the loft, and we could ride our bikes around. And it was just such a, you know, cool, different place to grow up in. It was right around the corner from Rock Island, and, you know, even though I'm sure it wasn't lost on my dad that he had, you know, moved, you know, it wasn't a family-friendly neighborhood that he had moved us into, but, you know, he still took me in passion, you know, on walks, exploring downtown, and, you know, and one day coming back from that, you know, passing by Rock Island, you know, they had this really grotesque, you know, like baby slaughter, you know, display in the front window to go with the, you know, punk rock vibe. And, you know, my dad wasn't, you know, uptight by any means, but he was a little bothered by that, and he went to talk to the people at Rock Island about, you know, like maybe toning it down or something. And I think they were dicks to him. And so that night, you know, he organized a little beatnik posse. They, you know, crept down around the corner and, you know, just like vandalizing the display wouldn't have really been my dad's style. So instead, you know, they painted some, you know, super gay rainbow fairy, you know, unicorn thing, you know, all over the display to clean it up for me and my brother. And, you know, he'd coach me in t-ball and baseball. You know, we were from he was such a great coach. And, you know, he, you know, had a different approach to sports. And, you know, his attitude about sports was that every kid on the team was going to get to, you know, shine. And that was probably more important to him than anything else. And, you know, that came at a little bit of the dismay of the, you know, average dad in Congress Park that signed their kid up for baseball. And so, you know, it didn't matter, you know, ninth inning, game on the line, you know, every kid was going to play, and not just, he wasn't going to give every kid a shot to like sit in right field and not really play. Every kid was going to play, you know, the same number of innings in the infield, same number of innings in the outfield. And, you know, I remember you know, a lot of the other, you know, more competitive parents on the team, you know, it'd be like the ninth inning and, you know, the game on the line to get into the playoffs or something, and like, come on, Ed, you know, you can't put Jim Ho on, you know, first base, he's never caught a ball, you know, but my dad did not care, you know, he was like, no, Jim Ho's going to play first base, and, but, you know, it worked out because we were always able to, you know, hang with and then, you know, even beat the, you know, West Side teams that had 17-year-olds with mustaches, you know, hitting court bats against, you know, us as 12-year-olds, but it always worked. And, you know, Joe, you know, kind of stole my thunder a little bit with my third and final story about my dad, but that was when he was the director of the CYRA, and he took over that position, and, you know, I think a big part of it was securing the permits for the fields throughout the years. And the way I remember it is, you know, the police athletic league was, you know, they had like a spring league, and the CYRA was in the summer. And, you know, at some point, the, you know, police being the, you know, greedy bastards that they are, they wanted to, you know, start a summer league too. So then, you know, they screwed the CYRA over with the permits. And, you know, I think the first year, even though my dad would, you know, camp out on the stairs of the city and county building to be first in line for the permits, the first year they screwed the CYRA over on those permits. You know, just drove my dad nuts, and I, you know, can remember him, you know, reiterating that anger to every person that would call about, you know, anything going on with the CYRA when, you know, my brother and I wanted to be talking on the phone to our girlfriends or whatever. And so, you know, I think they told him the story about, like, well, you know, the police athletic league got the permits first, or whatever. And so what my dad did was, you know, he snuck into the city county building and he slept in like a handicap stall in a bathroom to, you know, make sure that the next year, you know, at 7:30 or whatever, when the, you know, security guard or the sheriff deputy that, you know, let the police athletic superintendent in early, you know, that morning, you know, my dad was sitting there, like, you know, leaned up against the permit office, you know, like, no way did anyone beat me to get these permits. And that's just the kind of guy my dad was. He was a total badass. He was a fighter, and I'm gonna miss the hell out of him.
And now we're going to hear from the next generation. Dannica?
My grandfather changed my life. He was my best friend. He truly was. The things we remember and the silly little memories we hold on to when we lose someone is what grounds us to them. To the smiles and laughs we shared and the stories we've heard 1,000 times. I remember being little and sitting with him in front of his computer, spending hours playing with the colorful filters on his photo booth. I remember bringing him my middle school papers to review, and to much of my dismay, he would completely change. His English teacher tendencies would always take over. I remember writing back and forth with my grandfather, pretending and thinking he was really my tooth fairy, Twinkle. I remember sitting at the dining room table playing with watercolors for hours while my grandfather would teach me about surrealism, and while he would draw me in the things I begged him to create. I remember flying to Philly with him and my grandmother and meeting some of his lovely family that is here in the crowd today. I remember him comforting me on that flight and holding me close because my ears, nose, and head hurt from the congestion. I remember recreating his famous writing of Robber Sly right here in this very cafe, one of my favorite stories. God was my grandfather a storyteller, a beautiful writer. I would beg him to tell me his stories even if I had heard them 1,000 times before. One story he would tell over and over again was the Alfred story. I've heard it countless times. I could tell you the moment he was about to recite it for the millionth time. I would jokingly groan and announce to all, "Oh, here comes the Alfred story." But as much as I would joke, I would listen. I would listen to his excitement and pride that was just as bright as the times before. Me and my grandmother would joke and laugh every time, but I know both of us loved watching him smile and gleam with joy each time. My grandpa Eddie and my grandma Marcia were soulmates, or as close to soulmates as you could possibly get. Despite the bickering, which me and my little brother would constantly take on my grandpa's side, no matter how moot or how right or wrong either of them were, it became this loving little game we would have. Carte blanche each time we would take grandpa's side. He loved my grandmother so much. His heart and soul belonged to her. I love my grandfather. He changed my life and inspires me every day from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. My grandfather was so full of joy and life. He was such a creative, intelligent, clever, funny, passionate man. I'm so proud of him and everything he accomplished, and I am so proud to call Edwin Forrest Ward my grandfather. I miss you. I miss you so much, and I love you, Grandpa Eddie. Next up who will be reading is Jonah Ward.
Grandpa Ed was the best grandpa I ever knew. He would, every time I would go over, he would always warm my heart. And he was such a good grandpa, and his stories were the best. And one time when it was Christmas, or last Christmas, he got me a little waistcoat set. So did Grandma Marcia. It was really cool because it would light up, and it was really fun to play with. There was little ramps, I remember. My dad would set it up, and I would play with it a lot. But to my car, I accidentally lost the controller, so I can't really play with it until I got the controller. Woo!
First time I've had to raise the microphone. So anyway, Marcia's going to set up a video remembrance. So we're going to take like a 10-minute, call it a bio break, get a drink, because when we come back and we see the video, at the end we are going to get a drink, even if it's water, and In front of Jimmy. Sorry about that. Now I'm in front of the camera. So, anyway, let's raise a glass to Edwin Forrest Ward. Here. Thank you all.
Go Jaimee. So sorry about all the withdrawal. I need to focus on the writing and not cry.
So I wrote a little bit for a message for Ed for myself, and then I will wrap it up with Marcia's closing comments. Stay, lover, explorer, father, teacher. Stay, loved, honored, generous, imaginative. Stay, understanding, accepted, immersed, triumphant. Stay, fearless, creative, confident, and commanding. Stay, the man, creator, storyteller, and protagonist. You are central to our story. You are the emotional heart of the narrative, which is our lives. I know you could not stay, and you told me you were not afraid. I will take solace in knowing that, as they say, you are gone, but never forgotten. We will go on thinking of you through your stories and memories, and we will cherish always. Forever grateful to be a part of your life for over half of mine. Love you. Okay, on behalf of his beautiful wife, Marcia, these are her closing comments. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. It means so much to me and all of our family to have you here today. And thank you to Joe DeRose for providing us with such a lovely service. I also want to thank all of you who have helped me in the past several weeks to survive this new beginning and loss of my Edwin. Every single one of your thoughts, prayers, phone calls, cards, emails, texts, flowers, food, musings, memories, books, and in-person visits helped to bring me to this place of acceptance where I am today. Each gesture helped me on my way, and I am so grateful to all of you. I'd like to close this portion of the celebration by telling you what you most likely already know. Ed was not only a really good man, he was the best. He was the most generous and loving husband, father, and grandfather a woman and family could wish for. I can only hope that in the photos in my slideshow, in that a photograph is worth 1,000 words, can explain the meaning and depth of my love for him. Even though our 45 years together was blessed with so many rich and fun times, so many adventures and collaborations, it wasn't enough. He was so fearless and capable, adventurous, creative, and strong. At our time together was a journey that made every day special. To say that I am going to miss him is such an understatement. His journey towards the finish line was in many ways also a blessed adventure. He was confident and brave in the face of death. And I think it befitting for such a giant that many things came together in a way that magically helped carry him to the next realm. His sons and daughters-in-law remained faithful, caring, and true. His grandchildren were with him in the immediate days preceding his passing. His dream life was rich and provided him with knowledge and comfort. So many of you reached out with phone calls and visits, and for that he was so grateful to share his stories with you one more time. In his last summer, he saw Bob Dylan together, and even better than Bob was Ed getting to attend a couple of Jackson's baseball games in the beautiful summer evening. While he didn't get to see Jackson's team win the city championship, he was elevated for weeks knowing Jackson had hit a home run in that game. He was gifted, satisfied, inspired, and amused with his involvement with Alfred Clayhauer, and I would like to thank Deborah Clayhauer for making all that happen. He found a certain peace in providing the funeral services to dozens of families in 2021, and I would like to thank Diane Gansauer for that. He loved his years participating in the Neil Cassidy birthday bash here at the Mercury, and I would like to thank Mark Bleesner for that. I thank Michael and Jennifer Cartwright for publishing On the Way to Sleeping Giant and getting it done in such the nick of time. Thank you to Jason Eklund for his devotion and friendship to both Ed and me. And of course, a big thank you to Marilyn Megenity, that threw me off, for decades of collaboration for spoken word here at the Mercury, including the 10 years of Stories, Bring Your Stories.
and for helping us today in providing this perfect space to celebrate Ed. I invite you all now to stay, eat, drink, and mingle, and share your stories.